Now, classes and also constructor functions, which have been around for longer, do not just have properties which you can use to define the general structure of the object. You can also add methods. We do have the constructor method there, but that's just a utility function which is called when you do instantiate the class. Remember, in the past we only had constructor functions. Now we have that syntactic sugar, but we still have the constructor function which we can add to run any initialization code. You might also want to add a couple of functions, or methods as they're then called, which you can call on the created object. For example, a describe method here on our department class. Now a method is added like this. The name of the method, then no colon, no equal sign, instead parentheses, and then curly braces. The parentheses take any arguments you might need. Now let's say here we don't need any. Otherwise you could add parameters just as you do it in a regular function. And what you typically always need though is a function body or a method body between the curly braces. Here you now define the logic of your method. And there we might want to output the name of the department with a little bit of extra information maybe. We can do this of course here with console log, for example, department colon and then maybe name. However, this would not work. This would look for a variable name which has to exist inside of this describe method or outside of the class as a global variable. And as you see, if I choose H, I get an error for name. I don't do this or don't get this because there actually is a global name variable in the browser in the window object. Nonetheless, this would not refer to this name property here, but to some global name variable outside of this class. To refer to a class property or method from inside of the class, we have to use the this keyword as we do it here in the constructor. This then typically refers back to the concrete instance of this class that was created, and there with the dot notation we can access all the properties and methods of this instance. In this case, this.name. So if I now down there call accounting.describe like this, the this keyword when this executes will refer to this concrete accounting object that was built based on this class. So if I now save that and we reload, we should see this output here, which of course has a typo, but generally it works. Let's now fix the typo here. So this is how we can add a method. Now, one important word about the this keyword, as you probably know if you've worked with JavaScript a bit, the this keyword can be tricky. For example, if I would add another object here, accounting copy, and this is an object which just has the describe method, and there I point at accounting.describe, then if I call accounting copy.describe as a method, what do you think will happen? Do you think we get an error? We certainly get no compilation error, that compiles just fine. But at runtime, we see department undefined. And the reason for that is that what I'm doing is I'm adding a describe property to this object, which is created with the object literal, not based on this class, but just as a dummy object, not based on any specific class you defined. And then the value for this describe property is a pointer at the describe method in my accounting object. So I'm pointing at this method here defined for this concrete object. I'm not executing it, so I'm not passing the value of this function execution to describe. I'm really passing the function itself to describe here. So when I then call describe here on the copy, it does indeed execute the method. This all works correctly. The problem just is, when this method executes, this will not refer to this object this method was part of originally, so not to the accounting object. Instead, this, and that's a good rule of thumb you can memorize, typically refers to the thing which is responsible for calling a method. And responsible for calling the describe method here in this case is accounting copy, because we call describe on accounting copy. So this will refer to the thing in front of the dot here, which is accounting copy. That, however, is an object which has no name property. So when I access this.name, I get an error because this does not refer to an object with a name property. So name yields us undefined indeed. And that's why I'm getting this strange output. that's one thing you have to keep in mind, not just in TypeScript, it's a JavaScript thing, and of course, therefore, it can happen to you in TypeScript as well. Now, to work around this problem, you can add a parameter to this describe method, which is called this. That's a special parameter, a special instruction understood by TypeScript. If you add a parameter named this here, it's not really a parameter which is expected. You still can call describe without passing in any value. Instead, this is interpreted by TypeScript to be a hint regarding what this should be referred to. And now it's important to assign a type to this. And the type here, in this case, should be our class type here, so department. What I'm saying with this is, when describe is executed, this inside of describe, so in this case here, should always refer to an instance that's based on the department class. So an object which in the end would be of type department. And therefore now we actually get an error down there. We get an error here because what we got here is that when we call describe here on accounting copy, we're not calling it on an instance of department, so therefore this will be violated. This, in this case, will not refer to an object of type department. So here we add some extra type safety by adding this dummy parameter, because now if I try to save this, I do get an error related to this line here, because now indeed we would execute some code that would not work as expected. So we have to fix this, for example, by adding a name property here, for that to work, because now TypeScript sees, okay, the object on which you're calling describe now has a name property just like this expects it to have, because this is based on a department object which also has a name property. So now here TypeScript would be happy because we added name. If I remove it, we get the error back. With name, however, this works, and we avoid this undefined output from before. So that's important to understand about this, and it's important to be aware of this improvement you could add to your code to make sure that you catch unwanted behaviors like we had down there before.